Okay, and I'm going to be sharing my screen in a moment with an article. So, first of all, welcome to Jews and the News. It is Monday evening, January 12th, in case you're watching the recording. And we haven't met in a while, and just I apologize for that. Just I was in Israel for 3 weeks, and other things happen on Monday evenings as well. And next Monday, I'm going to be away again. Poo poo poo. My daughter is going to be induced on Wednesday with for a grandchild. For child number two for her. So we're going up to help for a week. So yes, so I apologize for the erratic schedule, and I appreciate you coming out when you get a notice that there's going to be Jews in the news tonight. So I have a number of tabs saved on my internet browser for of articles that I want to share in this format, and one of them is the topic for this evening. There's a lot of news going on that involve Jews, and this article that I chose is a uniquely Jewish, and I would say even more so, a uniquely conservative movement Jewish topic. Because for some denominations, it's not an issue anymore. But for the conservative movement, it is. And namely, the topic this evening is the recent um, uh, committee recommendations of the conservative movement regarding families interfaith families and their membership in the synagogue, and the role of the rabbi and the synagogue vis-a-vis these families. So before I get into the article and I share my screen, just want to point out, just so that we all understand what the conservative movement is, that makes this a challenging issue for the conservative movement. That is, conservative, the name of the movement itself and the name of this denomination is just challenging, because when we think conservative, we think political and we think right wing. That's like the first thing that maybe comes to people's minds when you hear conservative movement. You're hearing Republican, conservative versus liberal. And the idea, the name, whoever came up with the name of the movement, I don't know, but that's the denomination is over 100 years old. But at the time, conservative was about conserving. It wasn't about a political position, conservative versus liberal. It was about conserving tradition. But it's also like there was a book that came out from a rabbi of a synagogue in Great Neck, New York, who was the president of the Rabbinical Assembly back in the early 1950s. His name is Mordechai Waxman, and he edited a book called Tradition and Change. And so that essentially, it's a book about the conservative movement and contains articles in it that highlight kind of the thinking and the ideology of this denomination of the conservative movement. So tradition and change is really the essence of what our movement is about. That is, the tradition being the commitment to halacha, that is Jewish law. So let me even begin with a diagram to show you that reflects essentially what the three pillars of of Judaism is about. So we have this diagram. Oops, because of my background, this you can't see it. Okay, let me get rid of my background so then There we go. Okay. Okay. What I want you to okay. So I have blur my background on here. Oh my goodness, that's so unprofessional if you're watching this recording. Um, just a second here. Okay. Regular background. Now you see where I am in an empty bedroom in my house. And this is the diagram that I wanted to show. And on my screen, the words are written backwards, but I don't know whether you see it not backwards. But this essentially is, if you were to define Judaism in a traditional way, like Judaism for the past 2,000 years, it involves the relationship between these 3 points of the triangle, namely God, Torah, and Israel. Okay? And it's kind of like the recycling picture where you have arrows for the three sides. So they're not distinct elements, they're all interrelated. So a normative understanding of what Judaism is the interrelationship between the people of Israel, and we could also add the land of Israel to Israel, the people of Israel to God, and the Torah being the guide, the 5 books of Moses, but also more generally the rabbinic interpretation of the 5 books of Moses, the whole body of rabbinic understanding of Jewish law, all interrelated in this way. So if you take any one of the corners out, it doesn't mean that somebody isn't Jewish anymore. Like, there are Jewish people who don't believe in God but still identify as being Jewish. There are Jewish people who don't follow Jewish law in their lives but would still be considered Jewish. There are even Jews who don't believe that we should be devoted to the land of Israel. So it doesn't mean that they're not Jewish. It just means if we take out any one of these corners of the triangle, it means that it's no longer a normative, traditional understanding of what Judaism is. Okay? So God, Torah, and Israel are the three defining elements of what it means to be Jewish. Now, conservative Jewish, I'm not going to get into the other denominations. Tonight's session is not about understanding the differences between Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist. I want us to be able to understand conservative Judaism, so it helps us understand the topic at hand about interfaith families. So the best definition of conservative Judaism is that it's a commitment to halakha, the traditional understanding of Jewish law and Jewish practice, but understanding that Jewish law and practice evolves and changes over time. So that, for example, women, 95% of conservative synagogues now are fully egalitarian, that is, allow for equal participation for men and women. So that's not something that's traditionally something that is done in the Orthodox world. Ages ago, men and women sat separately in synagogue. Women were exempt from the performance of time-bound commandments. Exempt, not prohibited, but exempt. And men are, it's incumbent upon men to fulfill all of the commandments. So that's the traditional understanding. But over time, as the role of women increases in society and the movement 100 years ago for the women to have the right to vote, and women equal pay, and the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, which failed as an amendment to the Constitution, but still, the whole movement to allow for equality of the sexes has it trickles down into religion as well. And so within the conservative movement, the idea is, how much do we let outside influences influence the religion itself? And depending on the issue, and depending on about how much that particular value has overtaken society, determines how much it changes Jewish values as well. So that most people agree today, at least in the non-Orthodox Jewish world, that men and women should be treated equally in services. And so that's our synagogue is like that. And like I said, 95% of conservative synagogues in the world that are affiliated with the conservative movement, or globally it's known as Masorti, are fully egalitarian when it comes to participation in the service. The same dilemma, challenge, and discussion is about the role of people who are homosexual. How are rabbis permitted to officiate at commitment ceremonies, wedding ceremonies of gay and lesbian men and women? That is a more recent discussion from 20 years ago within the conservative movement that took a couple years of very, very serious discussion among the members of the conservative movement's Committee on Jewish Law and Standards, and they came up with a decision that yes, rabbis are permitted to officiate at commitment ceremonies for gay and lesbian men and women, and so that created not an uproar, but it certainly was something that was different, because it had never been allowed up until that point. And certainly in the Orthodox world, it's not something that is permitted. And here is the conservative movement departing again from the Orthodox world when it comes to egalitarian practice, men and women equally participating in services, and now with homosexuality as well. So all of that is to explain our commitment to Jewish law, and the understanding that Jewish law is part and parcel of how we understand our practice as a conservative movement. So here's where it becomes complicated. So, point number one, always within the history of the conservative movement, those who are deciding and deliberating these Jewish values and laws are the rabbis of the synagogues, and also the academics in the training institution, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and now there are other institutions as well. So it's the academics and the rabbis who are seriously deliberating these issues on behalf of members of the synagogue who aren't necessarily as committed to the values of the conservative movement as the rabbis and the academics are. So, if you walk into an Orthodox synagogue, for the most part, the people who attend Orthodox synagogues identify fully as Orthodox Jews. That, in other words, they practice in their homes and in their lives in general Orthodox Judaism. So everybody who comes to an Orthodox synagogue, for the most part, are people who observe Judaism according to Orthodox practice. I'm not so sure that that's the case for people who attend non-Orthodox synagogues. People, I think, have an idea of what reform is and what conservative is, and they might define it for themselves as that conservative is Orthodox light for some people, or certainly more traditional than a Reformed synagogue. And for some people, going to synagogue is not about the ideology of the movement itself and saying that I agree with the ideology because I practice according to the tenets of conservative Judaism, but rather I agree with the general cultural approach of what the conservative movement stands for, that it's kind of a more modern approach to Judaism with a commitment to traditional values. Okay, so I think that that's what most people understand what conservative Judaism is. So there has been a difference in between the clergy of the conservative movement and the members of the synagogues of the conservative movement. That clergy have a particular understanding of what conservative Judaism is that is different from the people who belong to conservative synagogues. So I, for example, have a commitment to Jewish law. I understand the ideology, and I made a decision. I grew up as a conservative Jew, son of a conservative rabbi. Became conservative Judaism was my life growing up, and then I learned more about it in high school and college. And I decided that when I wanted to be a rabbi, that I wanted to be a conservative rabbi, not a Reform rabbi and not an Orthodox rabbi, because I bought into what conservative Judaism stands for. So it's a failure of the conservative movement not to fully educate the members of conservative synagogues broadly as to what conservative Judaism is, but rather the conservative movement succeeded because it was seen as a more modern approach than the Orthodox movement, and it grew and flourished in the 50s and 60s without really a full educational program to ensure that members of the synagogue know what it means to be a member of a conservative synagogue. Okay, so I'm speaking in broad strokes here, and I know that there are conservative synagogues across the country where a lot of the members of those synagogues actually know what it means ideologically to be a conservative Jew, and actually are conservative Jews ideologically in their lives. So all of that being said, gets to the question this evening that I wanted to talk about, and the article that I wanted to share with you about interfaith marriages and how to welcome people who are, how to welcome interfaith couples into congregations, into conservative movement congregations. So now the halacha is, right? So marriage, for the conservative movement, marriage is legal. It's like, as a conservative rabbi, I can only officiate at a wedding where the couple is allowed by the state to get married, and I can only marry the couple if Jewishly they're allowed to get married. Okay, so in other words, if the state says that the couple coming to me are permitted to get married, so let's say one is a divorcee, so their civil divorce has been accepted and that has been granted by the state, then The one who is the divorcee is permitted to remarry. The other person is permitted to be married. The two can be married to each other legally according to the state of Maryland. But then I have, as a conservative rabbi, I have to ensure that Jewishly they're allowed to be married to each other. So if they're a divorcee, so then I have to make sure if the Jewish partner was married previously to somebody Jewish, then not only do they need a civil divorce, they need a get. That is a Jewish legal divorce. I cannot officiate at a marriage of a divorcee unless a get has been delivered to that person. So civil divorce isn't enough. It has to be Jewish as well. So the couple coming to me has to be has to be a couple that not only according to the state of Maryland they're allowed to be married to each other, but according to Jewish law they're allowed to be married to each other. Okay? And that gets to our topic this evening, that halachically, I can only officiate at a wedding of a Jew to another Jew. Now, I can officiate at a wedding of a Jewish man to a Jewish man, a Jewish woman to a Jewish woman, or a Jewish man to a Jewish woman, but I cannot officiate at a wedding of one Jewish partner with a non-Jewish partner. Now, I should also, I just want to say that some of the things that I might say might sound offensive or judgmental. And I have no intention to be judgmental in my discussion of this topic. I make no judgment about people about people and their marriage partners. I'm making no judgment about that. It might sound judgmental, and I apologize for it sounding judgmental. I just want to explain what the conservative movement's position is about marriage. So I, as a rabbi, am allowed by the state of Maryland and other states and the District of Columbia, and every state and the District of Columbia has different ways in which they authorize clergy to officiate a wedding in their state or District of Columbia, which is fascinating. But I am authorized to represent the state or the District of Columbia and sign the marriage license for the state or the District of Columbia. So I am an officer of the state or district, but I also am representing Jewish law or the conservative movement. So though a couple might be allowed to be married and they have a marriage license ready to be signed, that doesn't necessarily mean that I am allowed Jewishly to officiate at that wedding. Okay, so because of the conservative movement's commitment to halacha has something to say. Jewish law has something to say about couples, partners who want to be married, right? So, like I was talking about divorce, for example, someone who is divorced can remarry, but they can only do so according to Jewish law if they have a get, the Jewish document attesting to the fact that they are divorced. So I'm not allowed to officiate at a wedding of a divorcee unless they have a get, or I have seen proof that they have a get. Someone who has converted to Judaism, I need to see that they have halachically that is, according to Jewish law, converted to Judaism. And if they have converted to Judaism according to Jewish law, then they are a Jew, and I can officiate at their wedding to another Jew. But I cannot officiate at a wedding for a Jew and someone who is not Jewish. So, because one of the main halachic elements of the wedding ceremony is the groom giving the bride a ring, and as he does so, says, "Hare at mekudeshet li," behold, you are consecrated to me, "Hare at mekudeshet li," b'tabadzo, with this ring, Kedat Moshe v'Yisrael, according to the laws of Moses and Israel. So that's a legal statement. It's not like a couple exchanging vows, promising several things of how to act and behave and what they are in terms of love and other emotions that they're sharing with one another. That's all very important, but a Jewish law, a Jewish wedding is not a Jewish wedding without that line being said by the groom to the bride. And sometimes it's said by the bride to the groom as well when she gives the groom a ring as well. So that makes it legal. So one cannot say that statement to somebody who is not Jewish. Okay, so that's the halachic issue here, that marriage is legal. It's not just emotional. It's not just commitment. It's not just about love, but marriage is also legal, according to the conservative movement. And one can't take the legal element out of it and still have it be called a wedding. Okay, it would have to be called something else, but an official wedding involves an official conservative movement Jewish wedding involves that legal statement, among a couple other legal things too. Okay? However, the conservative movement also recognizes that the cultural changes within the American Jewish community, and recognizes that a huge proportion of the American Jewish community contains couples who are interfaith. And so for synagogues to survive, synagogues need members. And the conservative movement faces this dilemma because, as opposed to Orthodox, which is pretty strict about Jewish law, and everybody who belongs to an Orthodox synagogue buys into the Orthodox system of Jewish law, so interfaith marriages and the concept of interfaith weddings, to begin with, is not an issue within the Orthodox world. Or at least I can't speak to, because I'm not Orthodox, what the issues might be within the Orthodox world regarding people who intermarry. But in the non-Orthodox world, we as a conservative movement are different from Reform and Reconstructionist in that Reform and Reconstructionists don't have the same commitment to Jewish law that the conservative movement does. Within the Reform movement, it's a choice. Every individual has the choice to observe Jewish law to whatever degree they want to or don't want to. And in Reconstructionist Judaism, it's not even called law, it's called cultural norms. So it's just a different word to it. So we in the conservative movement, who still sees Jewish law as Jewish law, right? That what I mean by Jewish law, like the commandment to light candles on Friday night. According to Jewish law, we're supposed to usher in Shabbat by lighting candles on Friday night. So the beautiful custom of lighting candles is not a custom, it's law. And we recite a blessing over it. Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, who has sanctified us with his command, with God's commandments and commanded us. So that is considered to be law. Whereas in Reform and Reconstructionist, it's just seen as the custom, and people can, or in the Reform movement, people can pick and choose whether they want to light candles or not. Within the conservative movement, that's the way we have to usher in Shabbat. Okay, so it's seen as a commandment, it's a law, it's part of what we do as Jews in order to identify as Jews. So so how we get married is also understood in a Jewish legal way. And so there's the officiating at the marriage, and then there's people who come to belong to conservative synagogues who are married already, and how to respond to and welcome couples who are already married in an interfaith relationship, how to welcome them into synagogue. Now, we might wonder why this is news again, because the conservative movement has been dealing with this for the past 50 years or more. And it's been a matter of debate within conservative movement and a matter of evolution as well, in that as the years have gone, there's been a further allowance of participation of the non-Jewish partner in the Jewish life of the synagogue, to the point where people who aren't Jewish are permitted on the bima to open the ark. People who are not Jewish, some would say, could stand at the Torah with their Jewish partner to receive an honor at the Torah. So all this gets to how to make interfaith families welcome, especially when their children attend religious school and become bar and bat mitzvah. So over the years, our practice at Sharei Tefillah has evolved to allow for the non-Jewish partner to be more involved in the service, because we recognize the non-Jewish partner has committed to raise their child Jewishly, to belong to the synagogue, to attend religious school, and why at this milestone event that is so meaningful and emotional in a family's life would we turn the non-Jewish partner away or make them feel different or isolated. We want to welcome them at that moment and allow them to be as fully participating in the moment as possible. So, but again, the issue of Jewish law impacts this, because the other element of interfaith relationships is the identity of how a child who is born is recognized as a Jew. And according to Jewish law, it is the mother who determines the religion of the child. So if you have a Jewish woman married to a non-Jewish man, the child that would be produced from that relationship biologically is automatically Jewish. But if it's reversed, if it's a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman, the child is not automatically Jewish. Now, in the Reform movement, because they're not committed to Jewish law in the way that we are, have said that either parent can be Jewish, and as long as they belong to a synagogue and commit to raising their children Jewish, then their child automatically is Jewish. There are some in the conservative movement who try to advocate for that because the only other option when it's a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman and they have their own biological children is that those children need to be officially converted to Judaism by going to the mikveh. And that can be a major emotional turnoff to these families that now not all the time, but that sometimes in my career, families have said, I just don't understand why I have to do that. Because if I went to a Reform synagogue, I wouldn't have to do that. Why are you making me do this? So it's very hard to explain in a compelling way what Jewish law means and to explain Jewish legal practice to couples when they understand that in some synagogues their child is automatically accepted as Jewish, and here I am, layman says that they're not automatically Jewish. But it's not just me, but it's other conservative synagogues too. And so you see, just in the brief, and it hasn't been so brief explanation so far, the nuances and the complexities of this. So there has been a movement afoot within the conservative movement, and for the past 2 years, the Rabbinical Assembly, the organization of conservative movement rabbis, the Cantors Assembly, the organization of cantors of the conservative movement, and United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, the umbrella synagogue organization, had a committee discussing and evaluating an approach to welcoming interfaith families. And this received some press last month when that committee published its initial findings. And that's what I want to share my screen for. Here we go. Okay, so I'll make this a little bit bigger. So this is just from a few weeks ago from JTA, Jewish Telegraphic Agency. It's kind of like one of the reporting services for the North American Jewish community. And JTA, Jewish Telegraphic Agency, has a website, which is interesting for headlines and articles within the Jewish community, and many of the articles on JTA end up in the Washington Jewish Week and other Jewish publications like that. So Judaism's conservative movement apologizes for decades of discouraging intermarriage, signals new approach. A new report embraces engagement with interfaith families while leaving the ban on clergy officiation in place. So the issue first became, it made headlines because of this. The movement apologizes for decades of discouraging intermarriage, when in the end, what we're still doing is saying that clergy are not going to officiate at intermarriages. So how can you apologize when you're not making the major change by allowing rabbis and cantors to officiate at intermarriages? So it's kind of funny that, or disingenuous, to apologize when you're not really making more changes. Because I've always seen it as you're pulling people, you're trying to pull people in and welcome people in, no matter who they are, no matter who they're married to, no matter what their background is. We welcome everybody into the synagogue. And our membership application has changed over the years by saying, or it simply says on it, applicant number 1, applicant number 2. And it asks for Hebrew names. We don't ask if you're Jewish. we ask for Hebrew names. So either you have a Hebrew name or you don't have a Hebrew name. And if you don't have a Hebrew name, then that's the clue for us in the office, the executive director and I, to see, oh, maybe this person isn't Jewish and we should follow up. But because the application used to say husband, wife, or already assuming a particular kind of relationship with couples. So now it's just applicant one, applicant two. And then we say, and then we had also asked, are you Jewish on the application? We don't ask that anymore. It's just like a subtle kind of way that we've been doing this for the past many years. Just your Hebrew name, your father's Hebrew name, your mother's Hebrew name. Are you a Kohen, a Levi, an Israelite? So that's just, so either you answer because you know the answer, or you don't answer because you don't know the answer, and you don't know the answer because you were never told by your parents, or you're not Jewish. So that's the way we do it on our application. And lots of synagogues do it in similar ways to try to be as welcoming and non-judgmental in the membership application process. Okay, but at the same time, if you're saying we can't officiate, I mean, couples have come to me over the years, and I ask questions about who they are if they're not members of the synagogue, and they just find me from the phone book or something like that, and even that statement is already an obsolete statement. There's no phone books anymore, but just if they find me, however, and I don't know who they are, I ask questions, but I want to limit the kinds of questions without then, because if I get deeper into the questions, then I might be turning people away. I will ask, what's your Hebrew name and what's your parents' Hebrew name? So if they give me Hebrew names, then I don't have to ask, oh, did you convert to Judaism? Why do I have to ask that if I already know that they have a Hebrew name? So I don't have to get into a question, oh, if you've converted to Judaism, did you convert according to Jewish law? So that's what I do. You don't want to ask questions that you don't want to hear the answers to, right? But I need to ask some questions, but I don't need to ask so many questions. Okay? So I will ask if you've ever been married before. I mean, that I do need to ask, and then they tell me if they have been married before, then that will lead to further questions that could also, if they don't have a get, I can't officiate at the wedding. Okay? So let's see how much we can. I want to read a little bit of this article and then open it up for questions if you have. The conservative movement, one of the major denominations, is formally apologizing for decades of discouraging intermarriage and committing itself to a new approach centered on engagement. The shift marks a significant change in tone for a movement that long treated intermarriage as a threat to Jewish continuity, even as its long-standing ban on clergy officiating at such weddings remains in place. Leaders of the movement announced the shift in a report released Thursday by a working group representing the denomination's three main arms: United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, Rabbinical Assembly, and the Cantors Assembly. For decades, our movement's approach to families where one partner is Jewish and the other is not was rooted in disapproval and shaped by fears about Jewish continuity, the leaders wrote in a statement accompanying the report. But today, as we connect with countless families who want to learn, participate, and belong, we are committed to welcoming people as they are. So I want to say this. I would say that for this paragraph that I just read, the one in quotes, is accurate for the leadership of the movement and official policy of the movement. I would say that it's not accurate for how the actual synagogues are actually dealing with this, welcoming interfaith families in reality. Because, like I said, we as a synagogue have been as welcoming as possible for the conservative movement to be. over the years, try to be welcoming without questioning, without judgment. And I think most synagogues do that. But the official policy of the movement has not been a welcoming policy. So now the policy of the movement is finally catching up to the synagogues who have been the trailblazers here and dealing with the issues on the ground and and creating policies like our policy for welcoming Jews in the synagogue is really based, some of it based on opinions that have been written by the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards that permit uh, open openness to interfaith families, and our own congregation and religious committee discussing these issues over the years about how welcoming we're going to be to families. So it's really when the leadership has always been more negative and more anti, but the congregations themselves have been left adrift to be able to set policy on its own. So now the movement, the leadership is catching up, and it makes news, but it's not really news because synagogues have been doing this all along. And they really haven't made any change. They've only just caught up. And the only change that they would have made that really would have made news if they said that clergy should officiate at wedding ceremonies for partners where only one of them is Jewish and the other one is not. That would make major news. And then there would need to be a ceremony to be developed that would be that for clergy to be able to use for interfaith families. So this committee hasn't done that, and it's not advocating that. And there are rabbis in the movement today who are advocating to officiate at interfaith ceremonies, but this committee is not doing that. So like I said, the committee is just catching up to where the synagogues have been leading the way for the past several years. So with everything that I've said so far, are there questions or comments about this that you have? Sean?
So, would you officiate an interracial couple, but not have like a religious component to it, just as a?
So interfaith, you mean? So I will not, because my my role, I see my role as representing, as a clergy, representing the denomination of Judaism that I've been brought up in and trained in. And so I only will do, so when I am asked to officiate at a ceremony, the couple has to be allowed to be married. They have to have a marriage license from the state. I will not officiate at a wedding when there is no marriage license. I'm not allowed to. I could be kicked out of my rabbinical assembly if I officiate at a wedding where a couple does not have a marriage license. So the couple has to have a marriage license, but then they also have to be they also have to fit according to, they also have to be able to be married according to Jewish law. And they have to have a Jewish marriage license. That would be a ketubah. And so I personally can't see a way in which I can do a wedding without a ketubah. And the ketubah has to be written in a particular way. Now I know of rabbis and some conservative rabbis who believe in and will use non-traditional ketubot, the plural of ketubah. And so I'll get to your question in a minute, Margie and Steve, that you wrote in the chat. So for me, my personally, the way I've been trained and the way I understand my role as a rabbi is that I represent the state of Maryland when I do or the Commonwealth of Virginia or the District of Columbia. So I'm certified in
Yeah.
all three places, and I'm certified in other states and commonwealths across the country. Um, so I am an officer of the state or the district. And I am also an officer of Jewish law. And
So,
so according to Jewish law, a uh, a Jew marries another Jew. When a Jew marries someone who is not Jewish, then that is a different ceremony, and it doesn't mean that they're not allowed to be married. They can still have a marriage license from the state or the District of Columbia, but they can't have a ketubah, because the
right,
ketubah has Hebrew names on it of who
right.
the each couple is.
So, what would you recommend? You,
Ah, so if
I
a
mean,
couple
would
comes to me, if a couple comes to me, used to be I couldn't recommend,
right,
right? Because if I said no, if I recommend it to somebody else, that means that I condone somebody else's doing
right,
it.
right.
So
Okay,
that used to be. So I would say to couples, look, what kind of ceremony do you want? And if you want it to be a Jewish ceremony, I can't do the Jewish
right,
ceremony for you. And I also can't do just a justice of the peace ceremony. That I just don't do. It seems kind of ridiculous to have me be a justice
right.
of the peace.
Yeah,
So, but if you want a Jewish ceremony, I can't do the Jewish ceremony for you, but I know of rabbis who will do a Jewish ceremony for you. And so here's the problem. So there's one problem that could be seen is that I'm condoning this. Um, but I'm just saying to them, look, I understand that you want to have a Jewish wedding at this point in your lives when the non-Jewish partner hasn't converted to Judaism, or maybe does not ever imagine
right,
converting to
right.
Judaism. I can't do that wedding ceremony. But there are Reform rabbis, there are Reconstructionist rabbis who will do it. The only problem is the rabbis who officiate at interfaith marriages used to be that they take advantage of that and charge a lot of money.
Mhm. Yeah,
So, so the problem is like I'm pawning them off, but making them have to pay a
mm,
thousand or more dollars for a wedding ceremony.
mm,
That kind of demeans the whole thing and
mhm,
makes it all
mhm,
seem dirty. And
mm,
that's a whole other issue that I just don't have any control over. So that also is part of this whole discussion. Why make the whole ceremony kind of seem dirty? Why can't we find a way to if we welcome these families
right,
after the ceremony into the synagogue, then why can't we kind of find a way to
right.
do the ceremony too? And I don't have an answer to that yet. There are
So,
some rabbis who want to. I just don't have an answer to it for myself.
so would you recommend, for example, my older daughter is dating someone that's not Jewish. I think they're going to end up getting married.
Right?
When they've talked about having kids, wants to raise them Jewish. Would you recommend they get a Reform rabbi to do it?
So I would say, Sean, that it depends what kind of ceremony they want. If they really want a Jewish ceremony, then let's talk offline about that. But just know
You
that
do, yes. So,
but just know that because it's your daughter and not your son, because it's your daughter, children born of that wedding, of that marriage, will automatically be considered Jewish
right.
because that's how it just works. Jewish biology goes through the mother. But we can talk offline about that because everybody's
Yeah.
different and what they want in a ceremony, and it would then mean different kinds of referrals.
Yeah. Like I said, we got plenty of time to worry about it, so we don't have
Right,
to talk about it tonight.
right. And then there's also the point maybe the partner might consider conversion at some point.
Could be.
And then,
Could
you
be.
know, you could have a civil ceremony and hold off on the religious ceremony until the partner
Yeah,
converts to
could be.
Judaism. So there's a whole range of things to offer,
Got it.
and we can talk offline. Now, Margie asked in the chat, can a child become oh wait, you had a different question
I
first.
have actually three questions. I put two
I
in the
see
chat.
that. Okay, there we go. So I'll go in order. Do Jewish men need a get or only Jewish women? Both.
Oh,
So the way it works is that it's the man who delivers the get to the woman. Um, and so a woman cannot initiate the get process to deliver a get to the man. The man delivers to the woman. That's a whole other discussion with about Jewish law. But within the conservative movement, both of them, in order to get married again, the man needed to have delivered a get to his wife, ex-wife, and if the ex-wife wants to get married again, she needs to have had a get delivered to her. Okay, so that is egalitarian. Both both have to be involved in the get process. Can a child become a bar bat mitzvah in conservative movement if their father is Jewish but mother is not? Yes, if they have been converted to Judaism.
oh, so they would have to go through a formal conversion, not just go to Hebrew school?
Correct.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so many synagogues allow um, this kind of situation where the husband's Jewish, the wife is not, they have children, allow the children to be in religious school like kindergarten through first or second grade, but with the understanding that by third grade, when religious school becomes a um, more hours a week, then by that point the child needs to uh, have a formal conversion, like gone to the mikveh.
Okay, and I had one more question. It was too complicated to type.
Yeah,
So let's say a person that was raised in Reform Judaism
uh,
has a Jewish father.
yeah.
I guess the answer would be the same as the bar
No,
mitzvah.
it's very complicated, Margie. Right. Somebody who's raised in the Reform movement and then marries somebody in the conservative movement and then belongs to a conservative synagogue, theoretically, their identity could be questioned.
Okay,
That,
so if a man, let's say a woman has a Jewish father and went to, Reform synagogue,
yeah,
and a man who has a Jewish mother, they want to get married. She assumes she's Jewish,
right.
but would a conservative rabbi marry
So,
them?
so that's why the question I ask about what's your Hebrew name. So all this person, the person who technically isn't Jewish, if that person it technically isn't Jewish, answers, my Hebrew name is so and so, daughter of so and both Hebrew names, then I won't ask any more questions.
Okay.
It will only be complicated if they decide to talk and,
Okay.
and provide more information. At that point, then I have to figure out what to do because technically they're not fully halachically Jewish. And then it would be broaching the topic with them. Hmm. Now, would you mind going to the mikveh just to formalize your Jewish identity from all these years? And you can imagine that some people would be really offended by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people would say, oh, or let's say so if it's the woman, it could be like wrapped up in, some Jewish women go to the mikveh before they get married to mark
Yeah.
the occasion. You might want to do that and also combine that with
Okay.
with no, but see, I wouldn't want to make fun of that. It's just that you can see that how terribly complicated and emotional
Yeah.
this issue is, and how it could turn people away.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
yep, Bob.
Um, I remember a number of years ago, the number and the percentage of intermarriage was increasing. Is
Yes,
is it still going up?
I believe so. I
Okay.
believe so. It's pretty high. I don't remember what the numbers are, um, But yeah, and back to Margie's question about like someone who grew up in the reform movement to marry somebody in the conservative movement, this is not that's not a new question, and it's really it gets to, kind of unity within the Jewish community, and there is about this issue, Jewish identity, there isn't unity. And what does something like birthright, which provides free trips to Israel for Jews? So how do they define Jew, right? So and then there's Hitler, God forbid. Like Hitler defined somebody Jewish as somebody with a Jewish grandmother, a Jewish grandparent. So now, what does it mean to be an automatically citizen of Israel? Which definition of Judaism does Israel have in allowing Jews to automatically become a citizen of Israel? Do they use Hitler's definition? Do they use the Reform movement definition? Do they use the Orthodox movement definition? So it's really there. And so when somebody from America makes officially moves to Israel, makes Aliyah, as it's called in Hebrew, Aliyah, going up, but the formal immigration process, there's a number of the serious amount of paperwork that's done through an organization here in America now called Nefesh B'Nefesh. And one of the pieces of paper that Jews have to have as part of this paperwork, their official paperwork, is a document from a rabbi attesting that they are Jewish. So I, as a conservative rabbi, am allowed to write that letter to prove that somebody's Jewish, and it goes into their docket and it's not questioned. So now I didn't write it for my son and for my daughter-in-law, so I had some other rabbi do it for them. But I've written it for like Julia Kraut, Rhea Sears and Joe Kraut's daughter, Talia Horowitz, Maya Arbor, several people. They say, I hereby attest that so and so, daughter of so and so is biologically Jewish, or something like that. There's a formula to say, and it has to be on the synagogue letterhead, and I have to sign it in blue ink, and then it's official. But if I say that they're converted, then as a conservative rabbi, my statement to say that they converted to Judaism is not enough. And people who convert to Judaism who want to make Aliyah have to have an Orthodox rabbi write that letter and prove that they've converted according to Orthodox Jewish law. So this whole issue of Jewish identity, we're way past time, and this whole issue of Jewish identity is very complicated. It can be very offensive. And the whole idea of the conservative movement now coming out about this is to try to make this as welcoming as possible. And until the conservative movement allows for officiating at weddings, I'm not sure that will be seen as fully welcoming, right? So after wedding, yes, we're welcoming of interfaith families, but the process of the wedding itself, we're not welcoming at all. So it's a work in progress. So thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you for your patience and putting up with this whole background about it, and have a good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.